Okay, I wanted to talk today about a more of a general theme in the book of Yehoshuas. That is, the book of Yehoshuas deals with two separate subjects, and over a period of 14 years. One is the conquest of Eretz Yisrael, that's called Kibush Haaretz, and the other is the division of Eretz Yisrael among the tribes, which is called Chalukas Haaretz. And according to Chazal, although you don't really see it from the narrative itself, there were 7 years of kibush, and it actually took 7 years to divide the land up so each individual family and person had their chelek b'aretz. And thus you'll find in the second part of Yehoshuas, there are tribal boundaries, what's Reuven's boundary, Yehuda's boundary, etc., because that's the union of Chalukas Haaretz. Kibush and Chiluk. Now we will find, I'm not going to go into all the halachas right now, that many of the mitzvos that are connected to Eretz Yisrael, like Shemitah and Truma and Meiser, may not have applied until after the 7 years of Kibush v'Chiluk, which actually means that the counting of the years of Shemitah did not begin as soon as they entered Eretz Yisrael. It only began year 15, which means year 15 became year 1 towards the Shemitah. So it'll be very relevant when we start counting how many Shemitos were observed in Eretz Yisrael until the Chorban. Everything starts after the 14 years of Kibush and Chiluk. So again, if you had to summarize the book of Yehoshuas in literally 2 words, 2 ideas, it's Kibush and Chiluk. And that took place over 14 years. So I want to talk a little bit about the notion of kibush. Obviously, the Torah in Parshas Bamidbar gives us what are called the halachic boundaries of Eretz Yisrael. What is Eretz Yisrael? And the Torah gives you a northern boundary, and a southern boundary, and an eastern boundary, which happens to be the Yarden River, and a western boundary that happens to be the Mediterranean Sea. And the Torah says within these boundaries there's a mitzvah to conquer. Now you will recall, again I mentioned this last Siman, that in the beginning of Yehoshuas, Hashem says to Yehoshuas, Kol makayim asher tidroch kaf raglechem bolechem nesativ, any place where your foot steps, I will give to you. Rashi brings from this Sifri that even if they conquer something outside of the land of Eretz Yisrael, it will actually be considered part of Eretz Yisrael, based on the pasuk, Kol makayim asher tidroch kaf raglechem. Actually, just to be a little more exact, I'm not sure if I said it 100% correctly. These words, Kol makam asher tidroch kaf raglechem bolechem nesativ, do appear in Yehoshuas Perek Aleph. And Rashi there does bring the Sifri that even Chutz La'aretz, that is conquered by a Melech Yisrael and Klal Yisrael, has Kedushas Haaretz. But the truth of the matter is, the Sifri's derivation is not from Yehoshuas. The Sifri's derivation is from Parshas Eikev, 2 weeks ago. It says the same lashon, Kol makayim asher tidrech kaf raglechem. Rashi in Yehoshuas brings the Sifri on the pasuk in Parshas Eikev. So I will give you a question to think about, which I don't have the answer. Rashi in Parshas Eikev on that pasuk does not bring the Sifri. So why does Rashi bring the Sifri, which is darshaning the pasuk in Eikev, in Sefer Yehoshuas, and doesn't bring it on the actual pasuk in Parshas Eikev? That's a little bit of a kasha, but nevertheless, Kol Makayim does tell me that even if they would conquer Kuwait or Saudi Arabia, it would have the status of Eretz Yisrael. But obviously there's no mitzvah to conquer that, because one might ask, well, if that's the case, if whatever the Jewish people conquer has the holiness of Eretz Yisrael, then what is the significance of the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael? And the answer is pashut. Whatever is within the boundaries, there's a chiyuv to conquer. Whatever is not within the boundaries, there is no chiyuv to conquer, right? So the significance of the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael is that this was the chiyuv of Yehoshuas and actually the judges and even David HaMelech, because the conquest was not completed. Even though Chazal talk about 7 years of conquest and 7 years of division. So you might get the erroneous impression that after 7 years we had conquered everything. That's Eretz Yisrael. The emes is that absolutely is not the case. There continued to be conquests in the days of the judges, and even in the days of David HaMelech. There's, in fact, parts of Yerushalayim were not conquered until David HaMelech's time. But most of the boundary was indeed conquered in the days of Yehoshuas. Right? So there is a mitzvah called Kibush Haaretz, based on the boundaries in Parshas Bamidbar. Now again, as is always the case, whenever the Torah or the Nevi'im give us boundaries, how to apply those boundaries to a modern map are not very simple, because we absolutely don't always know where these different city points are and the like, and that's why if you look at even the Art Scroll, look at other Svarim, you will see that there's actually uncertainty regarding the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael, particularly the southern boundary. What is the southern boundary of Eretz Yisrael? And that actually has some halachic ramifications that's even relevant today for Shemitah. As you know, Shemitah year, it's not coming up now. You know, we had a few, well, obviously you're always looking forward to the next Shemitah, but you have a while. But it's, I'm sure you all know that the Rabbanut relies on a famous or infamous Heter called the Heter Mechira, in which in order to provide food for people in Israel, they sell, just like chametz, they sell the land to non-Jews, to Arabs, with the intention of getting it back, of course. And as a result, the land doesn't belong to the Jews, and therefore they maintain that they're allowed to cultivate the land, work the land, and thereby feed people during Shemitah. Now, this is called the Heter Mechira. I don't want to get into all of the details. It's not really relevant for us right now. The Heter Mechira was not originated by Rav Kook, but Rav Kook was the one who kind of institutionalized the Heter Mechira in the early part of the 20th century. By the way, Rav Kook's Yortzeit is coming up. It's a day after Rav Meir Simcha. We have two great Kohanim's Yortzeit this coming week. One is Rav Meir Simcha HaKohen, and the other is Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Cook. Rav Meir Simcha, the Or Sameach, someone that you should be connected to, was nifter in 1926. Rav Kook was nifter in 1935. Both of them great, amazing gedolim that we should emulate and follow in their ways to whatever degree that we can. But Rav Kook was the one who institutionalized the Heter Mechira. And let me point out that many have noted that when Rav Kook did the Heter Mechira, Eretz Yisrael was facing massive starvation. People were literally dropping dead in the street. And it was literally almost a situation of pikuach nefesh. So Rav Kook developed certain heterim because of very, very extreme conditions. And those conditions do not exist today where we can easily import food and the like. And therefore many have argued that Rav Kook himself, had he been alive today, would not have allowed the Heter Mechira. He only allowed it because of the extremity. We don't even realize this in some ways. Because of the Holocaust of World War II, in which 6 million Jews died. So it's like the later tsaras make us forget the earlier tsaras. But in Eretz Yisrael in particular, around World War I and a little earlier, again, we don't think about that anymore because of the Holocaust. There was massive starvation. People were literally dropping dead in the street. And the Heter Mechira, which is halachically based. Again, I don't mean Rav Kook just made something up. I mean, he wrote a whole sefer on it. But he kind of went with a more lenient approach based on the extremity of the situation. And many have argued Rav Kook would not have mattered the Heter Mechira today. Nevertheless, the Rabbanut has not accepted that, and the Rabbanut continues to operate with Heter Mechira, which is why, and Baruch Hashem, to the Rabbanut's credit, any product that is under a Heter Mechira Hashgacha that was produced during Shemitah is clearly marked that way, which is, again, that's to their credit, meaning it'll say in big letters, Heter Mechira. So if you're a person who does not rely on Heter Mechira as most of the Haredi world does not rely on Heter Mechira, so you'll know. It's interesting, just to tell you that companies like Osam, which makes so many products, they make both Heter Mechira stuff and non-Heter Mechira stuff, and they know where to market it. So in Haredi neighborhoods, it'll be non-Heter Mechira stuff. But if you go to the airport, right, be careful, right? During Shemitah, you want to buy a bag of potato chips in the airport, got to be careful, because it'll say in big letters, Heter Mechira, and the like. Okay, so the reason I'm... Is someone calling me, or I don't know what is that? Oh. Are we supposed to leave?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, very good. I'm glad we have a good fire security system here. The elevator, okay. Okay. Alrighty. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is the following. So the Eda Charedis, the Badatz, which of course does not rely on Heter Mechira, but they have an interesting counter shita that they regard certain parts of the southern Negev are outside of the biblical boundaries of the southern border. This is called the Arava. And therefore, they will import from Jewish farmers from the Arava because they consider that to be outside of the southern boundary of Eretz Yisrael. Now, let me point out that there are Machmirim who are Machmir on that as well. So as a result, the same way the Rabbanut has to label its products as Heter Mechira, the Eda Charedis will sometimes have to label its products Min HaRav, so that you will know, because once again, if you hold that the Arava is part of Eretz Yisrael, then once again it's prohibited for Jewish farmers to work. Now you see the point here. The Rabbanut's Heter is they sell the land to the Goy. The Eda Charedis' Heter is we don't sell the land to the Goy. Let it be Jewish land, but it's Chutz La'aretz. If it's Chutz La'aretz, Jews can work it. But if you question that Heter, that's even worse than the Heter Mechira, because you're not even having Goyim, you're actually having Jews do it. So it's interesting that this uncertainty about the southern border is actually the basis for a Haredi leniency in the laws of Shemitah for those who do not accept the Heter Mechira, right? So it's interesting that Haredim have their Heterim too. And part of their Heterim would be the Arava. Yeah.
Rob mentioned last month something about even land in Syria would have Shemitah if it was conquered by...
Yes. So that's going to be the question. The question becomes, even if it's not within the boundaries, was it not conquered? But again, our short answer is going to be that the conquest that we're talking about had to be a conquest by a Melech Yisrael, like David HaMelech, meaning the modern state of Israel having sovereignty would not qualify as a conquest for the purpose of Kedushas Haaretz. Again, it's a trick. It's not so simple why that's the case, but that seems to be the understandable case, that the expansion of the state of Israel. For example, Eilat is another example. Eilat, according to virtually all opinions, even those who consider the Arava to be within the boundaries of Israel, many say Eilat is not within the boundaries of Israel. Eilat is south of that. And as a result, many poskim say, in Eilat, you got to keep 2 days of Yom Tov. Mamish like Chutz La'aretz. If you grow something in Eilat, you're not Chayav and Truma and Meiser, although I don't think anything grows there anyway, and the like. So apparently the din of Kol Makayim Asher Tidrach Kaf Raglechem does not apply to Israeli state of Israel conquest. Yishan?
How does this work practically in Conquest in Israel? Like, if you go to a restaurant during the Shemitah year,
Yeah.
and it is one of any number of Mechira, how do you even know how Mechira are?
Yeah. So the short answer is that every restaurant that is kosher. Baruch Hashem, most restaurants in Yerushalayim are kosher. Has a tuda, a certificate. The certificate will indicate the organization, and for Shemitah at least, it'll also indicate the standards. So you're gonna have to be a little bit knowledgeable how to read the documents. But it will say something like no Heter Mechira, no HaRav, or it'll say Heter Mechira, yes HaRav. So generally speaking, you have to read the certificate all the time anyway, even non-Shemitah. But during Shemitah, it's especially important to look at the certificate. But in that sense, the disclosure is pretty good. You'll see it in the two dot. Yeah.
Just going back with the Heter Mechira, is it halachically actually an issue if someone consumes it, or is it just politics?
Well, it's in between. I wouldn't call it just politics, but yeah, there is a lot of politics. People make the Heter Mechira sound like if you had a choice, convert to Christianity or read Heter Mechira, then it's another pashat. Convert to Christianity is the much better alternative. So the demonization of the Heter Mechira is for sure politics. There is halachic ground. Rav Kook was not an insignificant Talmud Chacham. He was a great, great gadol. He wrote a whole sefer called Shabbos Haaretz, defending, articulating the Heter Mechira. It happened to be that the Chazon Ish, of course, was against the Heter Mechira. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach said lechatchila one shouldn't rely upon it, but he did say you cannot criticize somebody who does rely upon it. And Rav Aji Yosef said the same thing. So I think it's safe to say that a Ben Torah should not rely on the Heter Mechira, but one should not be mezalzel in people that are. And in fact, Rav Shlomo Zalman says, if you're in fact invited as a guest to someone's home who uses Heter Mechira, and if you wouldn't eat their food, they would be embarrassed or whatever, he says you can be somech and even eat the food. So it's not something that you have to be Yaharg Vel Yavor on in that way. So there are halachic concerns. I'm not, indeed, it is a matter of controversy, but there are bases on both sides and the like. Now, one political, again, I don't want to give a shir in Shemitah, obviously, but one political issue is this. For those who don't rely on Heter Mechira, and those who don't rely on HaRav, so where do they get their Shemitah food? So there are really two sources. One is pure imports from Chutz La'aretz, like Europe or United States. That's simply called Yevol Chul. Chul is Chutz La'aretz, meaning they get it just from America or Europe, actually. But the second is a little more controversial, and that is they get it from Arab farmers, meaning even if they don't allow them to sell the land to Goyim, they will buy produce from Goyish farms. Okay, that's important to know. Meaning they will buy from, it's called Yevul Nachri. Now politically, and certainly after October 7, I think we'd be more aware of this, but this was a bigger issue. When you're giving money, buying from Arab farms, where is that money going to? And to what use is that money going to be placed? Are you possibly funding terrorism? Are you possibly putting money in the hands of people who will murder Jewish children? So this is a very hot issue. Again, it's a Shemitah issue. It's not so relevant now. And that is, some say Yevul Nachri is like this wonderful solution to Shemitah problems. And others say it is absolutely horrendous because you're giving financial support to people who want to destroy Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael. Okay, so again, I'm not here to even give you an opinion on all of this, but just be aware that these are kind of the debates. So the Heter Mechira proponents say, better to have Heter Mechira where Jewish farmers are getting the money. It's a pro forma sale, but Jewish farmers are getting the money instead of Yevul Nachri, where Arabs are getting the money, and possibly some of them might be engaged in terrorism. But that's a political argument, and the question is, politics can't necessarily decide halacha, so I'm just making you aware of the issue. I'm not resolving it. When we get closer to Shemitah, maybe we'll talk more bi'arichas about it. Yeah.
So it can't decide it, but there is, for example, an inyan of non-Jews when it's substantially cheaper, for example, than buying from Jews. So is there a similar meaning here where out of such a concern you can, al pi halacha, be makel?
Well, I think it depends. It's one thing to say, "Oh, I can buy from a non-Jew if I can get a better price." It's another thing to say, I can buy from a non-Jew who's an active enemy of the Jewish people.
No, the other way around. I can buy from a Jew so as to make sure I'm not supporting an enemy.
Oh, well, once again, you can't use that if you're violating other halachas, right? I mean, that's the problem. I mean, you can use that in the abstract, but when it is in contravention of Shemitah laws, you wouldn't have a heter like that. Okay. But be it as it may, I just brought this up just to show you that the uncertainties regarding the southern boundary of Eretz Yisrael have interesting halachic repercussions even today. Okay, so there's a mitzvah of kibush. Now let me mention as a little aside that I mentioned this many, many times, and this year is not disseminated so much, so I'm not going to get hate mail. For some reason, whenever I mention this, for some reason, it drives people absolutely berserk. I have no idea. I really have no idea why. But the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. We've spoken many, many times that there is a machlokas, the Rambam and the Ramban, if there is a mitzvah d'oraisa of living in Eretz Yisrael. Ramban famously says that Nachmanides says, there's a mitzvah d'oraisa to live in the land of Israel even today. But what people often don't pay attention to is that Ramban includes in that mitzvah not only the mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael, but the mitzvah to conquer Eretz Yisrael, even by war if necessary. Which means the Ramban actually posits that the mitzvah of kibush, not just living, the mitzvah of kibush applies even bisman hazeh. Now, obviously, kibush is different than yishuv. Let me explain this. Yishuv is a mitzvah that devolves on every individual. I, as an individual, am supposed to live here unless I have heterim, and there are heterim and the like. Kibush is not a mitzvah on an individual, meaning I don't have a chiyuv like to go knock on an Arab's door and kick him out of his house. But there is a mitzvah on the nation of Am Yisrael to conquer all land that is within the biblical boundaries of Eretz Yisrael. So whether we do that today or not, that's a very big question, why we don't do that today. Pikuach nefesh, is that a heter, and the like. But that's the Ramban's shita, that even kibush is a mitzvah today. But even if you disagree with that, even if you follow the Rambam's opinion that there's no mitzvah of kibush today, certainly b'mei Yehoshua, for sure there was a mitzvah of kibush. Now, so, number one, kibush means conquering, establishing Jewish shlita, Jewish sovereignty, over all lands within the territorial boundaries as enunciated in Parshas Masai. North, south, east, west. Kibush. It took 7 years, but as I say, even after the 7 years, the job actually was not finished until much later. Perhaps it was never actually finished until Mashiach comes. Now, as part of that kibush, there were other things we were supposed to do. When we came to Eretz Yisrael in the days of Yehoshuas, it was not an empty land. It was not a vacant land. There were people that were there. And the people that were there were the 7 nations who inhabited what was called the land of Canaan. The Canaani, the Amori, the Chiti, the Yevusi, the Girgashi. The 7 nations. And the Torah says quite an amazing thing. When it comes to the 7 nations that inhabit Canaan, and those nations are extinct, they're not around anymore, the Torah says, Lo sechaye kol neshama. You must physically destroy these nations. Kill them, get rid of them, destroy them. And the Torah emphasizes this does not just refer to the men who are actively waging war, but this refers to the men, the women, and even the children. Lo sechaye kol neshama. This is apart from Amalek. The 7 nations of Canaan are not Amalek. Remember, Amalek actually comes from Esav. He's kind of related to us. The 7 nations of Canaan come from Cham. We're from Shem, the son of Noach. That's why we're Semites. These are Cham. One of Cham's sons was Canaan, and these other nations are offshoots of Canaan. That's why the land is called the land of Canaan. So the notion of eradicating the 7 indigenous nations of Canaan poses a real problem, right? Because we hear Hamas, other people, genocide, they want to wipe out, right? We talk about how awful they are, how bad they are, how evil they are, genocide, ethnic cleansing. Problem was, were we guilty of the same thing? What does it mean to enter a land and physically, totally eradicate every single man, woman, and child? So one issue that, again, you may say it's not a yeshivisha type of question, but I think it is a question, is how do we understand the morality of this? Now, it could be, who cares? Hashem says to do it, you do it. It's not for you to make your judgment if you think it's moral or not moral. But still, we try to understand, can we make sense of this? But I want to ask another question, which indeed is a yeshivish question, and that is, there are many parts of the book of Yehoshuas and the rest of Nach that seem to contradict the genocidal imperative. For example, when Yehoshuas sends 2 spies to spy out Yericho, which is the first city that they conquered. So you'll remember that they were given shelter and protection by a woman who is called Rachav. And she is called Rachav the Zona. And there is a machlokas. Zona normally means Rachav the prostitute. And indeed, Chazal seem to say Rachav was a prostitute, amazingly enough. Targum Yonasan didn't want to learn that way. So Targum Yonasan has a bit of a non-literal interpretation that the word zona means pundakisa, meaning an innkeeper, one who sold food. Zona, one who sells mazonos. Be it as it may, the Meraglim made a promise to Rachav Hazayna that they will protect her and even her family as long as she gathers them into her house. And you'll recall she would let a red string or a red rope out of her window, so when they come in and they massacre Yericho, they will know that anybody in that house is going to be protected. That would be a sign to remind them, don't touch that house. That's a safe house. Now, Rachav was a Canaanite woman. Now, the Gemara in Megillah does say that Rachav did convert, and in fact, she married none other than Yehoshua himself. So Rachav actually became the wife of Yehoshuas. But the question becomes, if there is a chiyuv to eradicate the 7 nations, how could they make a deal with Rachav? And it's not even just Rachav, her family. Who knows what her family is? Second cousins? I mean, we're not given a number. How many people did she manage to save in her house? That's one question. The second question, again, I'm skipping ahead, but these are stories that you should be broadly familiar with. There was a nation of Canaanites, or a group of Canaanites, who lived in a town called Givon. Givon is a village near Yerushalayim, actually. And they had heard that the 7 nations were going to be massacred. So what they did was they disguised themselves as if they were travelers coming from a very faraway country. They had old clothes and moldy bread. And they said, we heard the great miracles that Hashem did to the Jews in Mitzrayim, and we want to be connected to you. We want to make a covenant with you. We want to make a peace treaty with you because God loves you. And Yehoshuas did not know they were of the 7 nations. So Yehoshuas swore to them a treaty of peace, that we have an alliance. He then discovers they are of the 7 nations, but he does not kill them because he made an oath. So these Givonim became kind of a servant class. They became woodcutters and water drawers for the Kohanim in the Mishkan, that at the time was in Gilgal, later Shiloh, and etc. These are called the Givonim, or Nesinim is the Mishnaic term. Nesinim, they were Nasun, they were placed to be Chot ve'etz v'shoah v'mayim. Now, how do you understand from a halachic standpoint? How do you understand the Givonim story? Because if you make an oath to violate the Torah, let's say a person makes a shvuah, they're going to eat treif. Right? A person says, I swear that I will eat that pig. Or even if it's a negative thing, a person makes a shvuah, they're not going to put on tefillin. Now, it's a very big aveira to violate a shvuah, to be sure. But if you make a shvuah to violate a mitzvah of the Torah, the shvuah does not take effect at all. Because as Chazal put it, you're already mushpa v'omed. You took an oath at Har Sinai to keep the Torah. You can't make a shvuah to violate the Torah. So even if Yehoshuas swore to spare the Givonim, how could that shvuah be binding? It was a shvuah, albeit accidentally, unintentionally, in violation of the mitzvah to eradicate the 7 nations. So we have the kasha of Rachav, we have the kasha of the Givonim, and more or less you have all sorts of assorted questions. Again, I'm going ahead of myself. If you look at the end of the book of Shmuel, the end of Shmuel Aleph, rather, which is, again, in Chazal there is no Aleph and Beis, but what we call the end of Shmuel Aleph. So Shaul was smitten in war by the Philistines, and as he's dying, he asks his arms bearer to take him out of his agony and kill him. The arms bearer refuses, and Shaul falls upon his own sword and dies. That raises the very important question, which we'll talk about later. Did Shaul commit suicide? That's what the pasuk seems to say. Are you allowed to commit suicide? Did Shaul do this tremendous aveira? Okay. But at the beginning of Shmuel Aleph, we read about a young Amalekite who runs to David, thinking David will be happy that Shaul is dead. And the Amalekite claims credit for the act, although he's not the one who did it, but he claims credit for doing it. And David has him executed. What are you doing with young Amalekites running around? They're supposed to be eradicated. So the fundamental problem is really a twofold problem. One is the morality issue. That's a general issue. But the second issue is there seems to be kind of a lot of exceptions here in which the 7 nations were not totally eradicated. Or Amalek. Amalek is not one of the 7 nations, but it's a similar type of problem. There's a mitzvah to eradicate Amalek. So let me just mention right now, and we'll talk about it next week at more arichos, that there is a fundamental machlokes, Rashi and the Rambam, how to understand the mitzvah of eradication. The Rambam says, I'll start with the Rambam first. The Rambam in Hilchos Malachim actually says quite an amazing idea. The Rambam says, even with respect to the 7 nations, we offer them peace before we try to destroy them. This is called, we offer them shalom. And if they agree to peace, I'll discuss in a moment what is peace, we let them live in Eretz Yisrael. Tremendous chiddush. The mitzvah of genocide only takes effect if they reject Kriyas Shalom. If they accept Kriyas Shalom, not only do we not kill them, but they are even allowed to live in Eretz Yisrael. So what is Kriyas Shalom? Like, what are the peace terms that they have to accept? So number one, they have to accept to live, not to become Jewish. They do not have to become Jewish. But they have to accept obedience to the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. So renouncing terrorism and the like would be a requirement. Number two, they must accept Jewish sovereignty and governance. Now, the Rambam's actual lashon is they must accept to have the status of a servant class, avodim. It's not clear. It's not clear if he means avodim mamish, or he might just mean they accept that the Jews are the rulers of Eretz Yisrael. I'll leave that open to interpretation. According to the Rambam, and by the way, the Rambam extends this even to Amalek, amazingly enough. The 7 nations and Amalek. They have the ability to live in Eretz Yisrael and even participate in charity and social welfare if they accept the 7 mitzvahs of Noach. Number 1, number 2, Jewish sovereignty, and number 3, I'll leave as a question, they agree to be avodim, but perhaps that just means Jewish sovereignty. That is the Rambam Shita, that there is Kriyas Shalom for even the 7 nations. Now, that would actually answer Rachav. If Rachav tells the spies that she agrees to these terms, they're allowed to keep her alive. In fact, this raises an opposite question, and that is, why did the Givonim have to disguise themselves? Meaning the Givonim could have said, right, the Givonim are afraid if we say we're from Givon, we're going to be wiped out. So we got to say we're from Bolivia. Why? Say I'm from Givon. I accept the Zayin. In fact, now it's the opposite question. Instead of asking, how could Yehoshuas let them stay alive? Like the Rambam, the question is the opposite question. Why did they have to engage in a deception to stay alive? They could have been very, very open about what they did. And that's why you could have Amalekite people hanging around and the like. This is the Shitas Rambam, that Kriyas Shalom applied even to the 7 nations and Amalek. Rashi, in Maseches Sotah, disagrees with the Rambam. I mean, he doesn't mention the Rambam per se. In fact, a whole interesting question. Rashi was older than the Rambam, so Rashi would not have known of the Rambam. There's a very interesting question. Was the Rambam aware of Rashi? A little bit of debate on that historically, although he never mentions Rashi by name. But the truth is the Rambam very rarely mentions any rabbis by name. He never really mentions people by name. But Rashi is cholek on the Rambam's understanding. And Rashi says there is no Kriyas Shalom for the 7 nations, but we have the following options. There is a Chazal, Talmud Yerushalmi, that says when Yehoshua was about to enter the land of Israel, 3 proclamations were sent to the 7 nations. One is, do you accept peace? I'll come to that. The other is, if not, get out of here. The third is, we're going to wage war. Which means, Rashi's opinion is, we offer them peace only before we actually begin our milchama. So he is moda. I mean, maybe I misstated it a minute ago. Meaning, even like Rashi, there's kriyas shalom. But kriyas shalom applies only before we begin our milchama. Which means, let's imagine we're fighting Yericho. And in the middle of that fight, some people want to surrender and say, we accept the 7 mitzvahs. In such a situation, we don't accept peace or surrender at that point, because of the assumption, Rashi says, that it's not sincere. So according to Rashi, the kriyas shalom is only before we begin milchama. It is not after we begin. See, unlike the Rambam that says at any point. According to the Rambam, at any point, a group of 7 nations can come and surrender with the terms of peace. According to Rashi, kriyas shalom is shayach only before we engage in milchama. However, even though Rashi is stricter than the Rambam, Rashi adds this element that before we engage in milchama, they are given the right to leave the land without any consequence. They're given free access to leave. The Rambam does not, I have to check, I don't want to say for sure, I'll double check. I don't think the Rambam mentions that, Prat. And I'm not even sure, would they have that option afterwards? Meaning, Rashi does learn, once we make milchama, we don't give them the option to stay via kriyas shalom. Yeah, Rashi clearly says that. But the question I have is, would we give them the option to leave? Because if you think about that, that kind of addresses the genocide point, meaning to say, it's not genocide, they can leave. Okay, well, we'll talk about this more bi'arichos, but I just wanted to introduce this machlokas Rashi and the Rambam, because this will be a fundamental question in the learning of Sefer Yehoshua, how to deal with the mitzvah of eradicating both the 7 nations and Amalek as well. Okay, so we'll continue with them next week, and I guess we'll see you later today. Okay.
Thank you for listening to this Awesome production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.